Our next presentation is going to be more geared toward a landowner concept. Jim Stone is going to talk about the Blackfoot Challenge and the Cooperative Conservation in Action. I heard Curtis Taylor talk about the Blackfoot Challenge once, but when he couldn't afford shoes and worked in a coal mine. The Blackfoot Challenge. Come on, it's not that early. Anyway, let me make a note to myself. Slow crowd, they don't understand. Jim Stone is a native Montanan. He graduated from Montana State University in 1983 and took over his family's ranch in Ovanda, I hope that's right, in 1984. He's been a member of the Blackfoot Challenge from the beginning and currently serves as the chairman. Jim Stone is an essential rural community leader serving on the local fire department, the school board, county planning board of adjustments, and the Powell County Weed Board. His Future Fisheries Commission, among other volunteer efforts, is one of the leadership things that he pushes throughout his area.
We were milling around a little bit last night, and I think I understand why they didn't put Montana on my little deal here, because we'd get visiting a little bit, and somebody go, "So where are you from?" "Montana." And they go, "Don't you guys have some sort of a wildlife society up there a little closer north?" But anyway, we actually do. But actually the real struggle was telling my wife that I was coming to Nashville. We're shipping about 10,000 head of calves across the valley here this week. So me going to Music City is a little bit of a stretch too. They think this is my own vacation. So we're going to try to maybe give you a little bit of history of some things that we're doing up in Montana. But I always like to start with a story. You all kind of work in and out of the government a little bit. And you know the U.S. government, they're always struggling to come up with some sort of a program to test how people's mind, put under extreme pressure, can make things work. And so they had this concept. They rented this warehouse and got these two huge wrecking balls and put inside that warehouse. I said, you know, all right, those German engineers, they're pretty sharp fellers. So they got a couple German engineers, and they put them in there, lock them in that warehouse. They were going to come back in a couple weeks, see what you guys came up with. So they come back a couple weeks, open up the door, turn on the lights, and here are these two German engineers. They're sitting on the hood of this just amazing luxury automobile. They're like, this thing's got all the bells and whistles. Man, it snaps down the road. Unbelievable. Government's going, oh, that's pretty good. These guys are sharp. Well, we got to keep working at this study a little bit. And so they think, oh, those Japanese now, they're sharp characters. So they get a couple Japanese engineers, and they do the same thing. Come back a couple weeks, open the door, turn on the lights, and man, here's this just amazing little laptop computer. And they're sitting there going, come on, we solved all the health issues. You tell it, just give us something. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good. Well, it's kind of a two-legged stool. So they're like, well, they're looking at this deal, and they go, well, you know, some of these ranchers in Montana are pretty sharp, so we'll do the same thing. So they locked a couple of ranchers in there, come back 2 weeks, open up that door and turn on the lights, and by golly, if those ranchers hadn't broken one of those wrecking balls and lost the other one. So that's kind of how ranching works, and if you sort of get the idea of how we kind of deal with wildlife, you'll see how this thing goes. So we're going to try to give you sort of a flying trip through the Blackfoot. So the Blackfoot River, most of you are sort of aware of that from Norman McLean. Eventually all things merge into one. A river runs through it. The book there explaining a lot about what Montana was. We kind of laugh in the Blackfoot because most of the movie, if you were there, was taken more towards Bozeman and Yellowstone. And Robert Redford, I think the local Trout Unlimited group, we got about 5 pair of waders out of that whole movie thing. And we kind of laugh now because really what that movie did, it sort of set a precedence for us to sort of get up and start moving a little bit, because we said the sequel was always going to be the realtor runs through it. Here we are located, again, in Montana, western part of Montana. Most of you probably interested a little bit in the crown of the continent ecosystem. If you're looking up, it runs all the way up into Canada, but you see the Blackfoot located at the southern tip of that, and it's actually one of the focus areas for the American Great Outdoors. Here we are, we're about 1.5 million acres, 3 different counties. Watershed, the Blackfoot runs 132 miles through the center of the valley. There you are, 7 different communities. Look at that ownership. Is that kind of crazy? One of the things when we first got started, a lot of people said, man, how are you going to work with all those diverse interests? So you look at the green being Forest Service, wilderness type backcountry, Yellow's BLM, the blues, state lands, the pink being corporate timberland and Plum Creek timber, and then really the sensitive part of all this is the white land you see there is private lands, mostly intact working ranches. But that's really how the name came about, because a lot of people said, man, if we're going to work with all these diverse interests, it's going to be a real challenge. This is looking north out of our ranch, Jones Lake, and all sort of the depressional wetlands associated with it. Again, pretty rural country up in Montana. Still about 8,900 residents now, 2,800 households. But again, it's an interesting way to be able to work through all these questions and answers that we're doing on the ground, being a pretty intact landscape. 10,000 years ago when the, what am I trying to say? The Ice Age, not the Ice Age, but the ice moved away. It left in just an incredible mosaic. So we've got all the critters, the grizzly bears, bull trout, elk, bald eagles. It's kind of an interesting story, guys. This part of the valley was Lewis's return trip, the return trip of the buffalo. And at that time, today, we're just reintroducing trumpeter swans. So they have the exact same critters in the valley today that we had roughly 200 years ago. Pretty amazing. 1,900 miles of perennial streams. Again, the uplands, native prairie, huge part of the valley. And again, the Blackfoot's really sort of the heartbeat of how we get work done. It's sort of the barometer of how we're doing it as landowners. But really it is, thanks to the landowners that are making this whole thing come together. This unique landscape. But things are changing. As everywhere in the country, things are for sale. At one point, some of the local residents were saying the river was overdone, and how are we going to adjust to that? Recreation. The more you do, the more people want to come enjoy what's going on. So we've been having to deal with river recreation issues. Mining. We have 200 tributaries that drain into the Blackfoot. Almost every one of those, either from placer mining or open pit mining. So a lot of issues there. For some of us in the cattle business, grazing issues are sure a part of what we're looking at. Timber issues. I guess I could be looking right ahead of me here. Timber issues are definitely a problem. Invasive weeds. Western Montana, a lot of things coming from the west. Leafy spurge is one of them. Very interesting thing to deal with. It's one of our biggest threats to native prairie. But here you are. Kind of a funny statement. If this Bitterroot is a local watershed to the west of us, things are getting too crowded, come to Ovando. So how do we avoid these kind of train wrecks? It was really about bringing people together. It's about the people. And we're going to talk trust and credibility. How do we get that? How do we get people organized to work on these issues? And it really came down to this. This was one of the meetings in late 1980, I think 889. And the Blackfoot had been listed as one of the 10 most endangered rivers in America. They wanted to list as have a scenic designation. And I'll tell you from history, when I grew up in the 70s, where conservation wasn't sexy, the word conservation, we had landowners that were saying, you know, if we're going to solve wildlife issues, if we're going to figure out how to work together, we got to start working with our neighbors. And at that time, people weren't working with state organizations or federal organizations. And to be really truthful with you, we weren't talking to each other as neighbors at all, as landowners. And so this kind of threat kind of came up, and people had started sort of forging some partnerships and working a little bit together. But this thing really scared people. They said, what is going to happen if all of a sudden the management of that Blackfoot River, that heartbeat of our valley, what happens if they take that away from us? It's controlled from somewhere outside of Montana or the Blackfoot. Really got people to perk up their ears and say, we got to do something. So it's just sort of standing there right on, this is where the Clearwater runs into the Blackfoot, people talking those issues. But you know what happened? We didn't have any data what was going on in the Blackfoot. They were saying the river was dead. And so it was really the landowners that got up and said, hey, we're going to raise a little bit of money and we're going to give it to our state Fish and Wildlife Agency. We're going to find out what's going on in that Blackfoot. And they did that. You know the outcome of that, guys, is that there were problems in the Blackfoot, but it really wasn't the main stem of the river. You know where all the problems were? All those 1,900, those tributaries, those 200 tributaries, that's where they were. You know where a lot of that grows? Right through places like our ranch. So we had to get people involved, and it really was a start to sort of bringing this coalition together, people starting to care about the valley and people itself. The other thing that amazed me, I got started, I'm kind of an odd feller because I don't like water. I've never floated the Blackfoot River. I don't fish, and so all those kind of things. I got invited to the local Trout Unlimited meeting back in '89. And I thought, boy, that's odd. Why would I go to a Trout Unlimited? What do trout have to do with my family ranch or raising cattle? So I ended up going there. The great thing about this is a very unique group, guys. This was landowners sitting around the table talking about issues that you all talk about every day. How are we going to work together? How are we going to solve a lot of this stuff? And what we learned out of that was coming together is that you put landowners that have been living on the land for generations, put them together. We came up with this idea. It's really a ridgetop to ridgetop. If we just focus on the Blackfoot River, is that going to solve a lot of the issues that we have on our ranch? Absolutely not. We have to get out wider. I had to understand the values of cool, clean, connected streams as much as that biologist had to understand exactly what the hell a cow meant to that. And I think that was, again, it's these little pieces. You know, conservation's slow. You know, I'm living for my 11-year-old son right now, you know. That's the generation that we're trying to protect right now. And so it's a long road to building this kind of collective cooperation. So how do we do all that? You know, you got to do conservation, I think, well on the ground, you got to bring it back to the communities. So often things get jetted in, we got plans, we got all this stuff that comes in mid-level. For us on the ground, we got to let this stuff come up from those communities. So what do? We spend a lot of time talking about how we bring those communities together, figure out what is it they want. And so in 1993, we started a group called the Blackfoot Challenge, and I read this mission because it's exactly what makes sense to me. It's to coordinate efforts that will conserve and enhance the natural resources, rural way of life in the Blackfoot watershed. Pretty simple, right? We do support environmentally responsible resource stewardship. So how do we get stuff done? When I was a kid, I remember my folks being involved in some county planning. And they got a lot of the people together, and then all of a sudden, boy, you know, they remember saying, well, Bob, he's a troublemaker. We'll just sort of leave him out, and we'll see how this whole thing goes. So they spent 2 years working on a county plan, brought it out to the public. 30 seconds, it was done. You know why it was done? Because it didn't include Bob. And so the thing I've grown up with is you got to have everybody at the table. Now, that's hard, isn't it? I mean, why would ranchers, do we have to have the wilderness folks or all the people we want, oh my God, they don't like cows? You got to have them at the table, and that's what has really made the Blackfoot very successful, is we invite everybody in, and that's incredibly important. Building trust and credibility, communicate, you know, all these words that we say every day, you know, we have to do it. We have to practice that. We have to continually go back. We have more meetings based on the fact of just checking back in with these 7 different communities to make sure we're on track. Those are the folks that are there. The other really important part of this story is this thing is landowner-led. Out of every one of those 7 communities, we have landowners that sit on our Blackfoot Challenge board. And it's got to come from those folks. I can't make decisions for my neighboring community. They go, Jim, go home. You worry about your own. So we empower those landowners to come, talk about that, put us out front. And you know what? It makes you folks very, very efficient. When we all are sort of taking some of the beatings and getting those people involved, it brings a lot of people for you to work with. So again, sort of accomplishing the missions, again, seem pretty straightforward. So how do we do all this stuff? You can talk about all this, how we hold hands and we sing Kumbaya or whatever we do at our meetings. How do we get stuff done? Isn't it? It's the tangible things that we get done on the ground that's important. We got to show successes. So we sort of say it's sort of the pieces of the puzzle, it's sort of our committees. And so through this, like most, we have water resources, we got wildlife issues, forestry, invasive weeds, a group that runs the show, the executive. And this conservation strategies is probably sort of looking again at that 30,000-foot level across. How do we look at the valley as a whole? And then last but not least, education. How do we educate our young, keep people involved, but also educate ourselves as landowners? So there's sort of 4 prongs how we work on that. Protection, management, restoration, and education. And so we'll start out a little bit of protection there. Conservation easements, one of the big tools that we're using in the valley to get stuff done. On our ranch, we have our ranch is about 2,800 acres. We have an easement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But again, it's about tools in the toolbox. This is not a win-all deal, but it's a tool that we use to keep working ranches moving. It's a great estate planning. There in the center of the valley, you see that yellow. That's changed a little bit. I think we're about 130,000 acres with about 7 or 8 different easement holders there. And I put this up as a, you know, I get a kick out of a lot of these terms people use, and we use them all the time. So landscape conservation. If I probably asked all of you to write something down on a piece of paper what landscape conservation means to you, you'd probably, all of us would probably have something different. And that's nothing wrong with it. It's good. But I think what's changed what we do in Montana is that we do landscape conversations. And you got to have that before you get to landscape conservation. And so often we want to jump that stage to get to this slide right here. I'm going to go back. That was in 1993, about 8,000 acres of working landscape conservation. 2011, about 285,000. And I say working lands. This is not just about protecting with easements. This is working lands. This is making communities working with their neighbors. That's pretty amazing stuff. But again, political savvy. Huh? How do we get all this stuff done? It takes money, right? You guys know that better than I do. It takes a lot of money. We have a project, we worked with Plum Creek Timber and the Nature Conservancy. We bought 89,000 acres of Plum Creek timber. The Blackfoot Challenge went through that to help disperse that through the local communities. Again, but you have to be able to go to Washington, right? We got to be able to empower ourselves as landowners to do that. How about some management? Grizzly bears. Those critters they're back. And as you can see, this is kind of a hard slide, but isn't it kind of amazing where you see all the activity right around all that working lands, conservation, all working together, right? So how do we do some of those things? How do we keep grizzly bears and folks like ourselves, cattle ranchers or whoever, working on the land? Human safety, all those kind of things. We spend a lot of time trying to deal with wildlife interaction. One thing, so we've got grizzly bears on the ranch. Just had one chase a bow hunter off 2 Sundays ago. So how do we deal with all that? How do we deal with that calving? Simple things like just coming in and electric fencing calving lots, those early spring lots, those bears move right through. What's the one thing that landowners do? What do we do with all our critters if we lose a calf during calving or cow? Boneyards, exactly right. How do you think we handle that? We worked with one of our partners, Fish and Wildlife Service, and we haul those off. And we used to take them down and render those critters, and then that got pretty expensive. So now we have about 85 landowners that they send a truck around, a local guy runs that truck and runs around to each one of those landowners, and we're composting them. We're working with the Department of Transportation. They're composting their elk and deer, right? We're composting our critters. They're using that product to re-veg highway sites. So again, taking those attractants away. In 2003, we had like 70 conflicts. Last year, we had 3. So it's that kind of thing. It's an easy way to make us be very efficient, and with help from our partners, we get a lot of that done. Restoration, tons of stuff going on with this local Trout Unlimited group. Again, amazing partner to get things done, but with the bull trout listed in West Slope Cutthroat, again, you got to have that data. And for ranchers, I'll guarantee you, we're tough to get us to move about that, but we got to get that data, and we've got to get involved on our ranch to help do that. So again, a lot of things, feed lots, all those things, changing how some of these streams work. So we're getting right in there doing stuff. You know, on our ranch, I mean, most of these places, you know, were built because Grandpa did it, and they built it around that stream because, by golly, they didn't have electricity. They didn't know what solar or wind power was at that time. We've got to change. We've got to open up our minds to change. And with all of our partners there in the Blackfoot, we're able to do some of this actually in-stream work and also off-site water. Cows will drink out of a tank. This is a program we're using on our ranch. You know, we like to beat our thumb with a hammer constantly, I think, because it feels good, I guess. But, you know, when my folks started, we were building hard fence for a grazing system. How do elk and deer and all those critters work with barbed wire? Not so good, right? So what do we spend most of our time fixing that fence, don't we? And by golly, isn't it amazing that Fish and Wildlife Service, their partners program, came to Jim and said, boy, you know, they do make this funny stretchy cord. They've been using it about 200 years in New Zealand, electric fence. You know, we could try doing some of that. So on our ranch, we have no internal fence. We're using this poly cord. We built this little winder so we can move it, deploy it rapidly. We've got an incredible high-intensity, short-duration grazing system that's working great on our place. If we'd have done the typical natural resource conservation program with all that fencing, would have been about $120,000, $150,000 worth of fencing. My son would be fixing fence for the rest of his life. We're doing the same grazing system for less than $10,000. Pretty incredible. That's opening up my mind. We're just stubborn sometimes. So, again, a lot of in-stream flow, getting in there, changing those things. Again, sometimes we can love things to death, but that Trout Unlimited group spent about $9 million doing this work outside, this ridge top to ridge top. Everything from grazing systems to in-stream. Community-based, we got to get into the schools, right? We got to have these schools understanding that. Get our kids, where are they going? Most of them are leaving to go somewhere else. We got to get them interested in what you all do and what we do as working landowners. So here's just a few of the accomplishments, I think. And again, these numbers all change day to day, but you can't get to these numbers without partnerships. We have about 160 partners that we use. I say it's the Rolodex of resource management for landowners. There's nothing that I've run into on our ranch that we haven't been able to pick up the phone. Somebody has not been able to route us to somewhere where we can get some of these things done. Again, that 90% reduction, human grizzly bear. I know somebody's probably going, Jim, you got wolves up there. Wolves are a tough thing to crack. That's a social issue that I'm not sure we've been able to really successfully deal with yet. But one thing a lot of us are doing is we're using range riders. We still, because we are rural, we still have sort of that old time where one person sees a bear, they pick up the phone, call 10 people, they call 10 people, pretty quick you got 100 people know where that bear is. That's good. Information's good, and we're not hiding anything. We know our partners aren't hiding anything. And so we're using range riders, so if they see a wolf, people are calling up, that range rider moves in. If there's a cattle herd there, they're dealing with that. That makes a lot of sense. We're using a product, going back to that electric wire, called Flattery. Probably all of you are familiar with it. I hadn't, but it sort of looks like you're a used car lot. It's got the red tape, and you string that all out, and it looks like you're having a party, I guess, and nobody invited. But we're using that product. They used that many years ago, I guess, in Poland to get rid of the wolves. So now we're using that on fringe areas where next to our calving lots, or in the trees where we've got wolf activity in the summer where we're grazing our cows. So far, works out well. But most of it, to be honest with you, is just letting people know where those critters are. And that's that communication link that really makes a difference to us. So there you are. There's your trumpeter swan. They're back in the valley. We had 5 cygnets this spring, so we know now they're starting to nest. Again, pretty amazing things. This whole partnership, you can't do all this stuff, guys, without having many, many partners. Got to get people involved. So this is sort of my soapbox before we run out of time, guys, but we were talking a little bit last night. What is it that landowners can do? And we've been very successful having landowners be part of that, building that up, going to talk to our senators, doing all this stuff. But I would say I think in this day and age, the federal partners are right to here. I think they've done a lot, and if Greg Nidecker, our fisheries wildlife biologist from the service, was here, he'd say, "No, Jim, you're exactly wrong." But I think it's time for private landowners to stand up and help all of you. We've got to take the lead, guys. And I think we can do that. It's kind of a funny story. We were involved in President Bush's Cooperative Conservation Conference in St. Louis back in, I guess it was 2006, I think. And the challenge got to go talk a little bit about what we're up to. We came out of there, and a guy named Jim Levitt was standing there, and he said, you know, he's part of the Harvard Business School, and he said, you know, you guys got to apply for this Innovations in America grant. And we thought, that's all right. So we went home, nothing really typical. We didn't do a thing about it. He called up a couple weeks, said, have you guys done anything with that? Well, we ended up, long story short, doing that. And we, out of 1,100 applicants, they whittle you down, and we had to go to Harvard numerous times, and we had 5 minutes to tell our story in front of a guy named David Gergen, who you probably know has been 4 different administrations, and one of the Kennedys. And I mean, it was for a bunch of rednecks going to Boston. It was pretty cool. But the cool part was that we won one of those grants. So what was our innovation? Our innovation is transferability. And that's what I thank all of you for today, is this is, so often I get wrapped up in that this is all about dirt and cows and all that, the resource. And it took me till a number of years ago to really understand it doesn't have anything to do with the resource. Resource comes secondary. You know what it's all about? You know what we have in common? Is people. That's what our story in the Blackfoot is. We can transfer that to people. That's why I'm here today. Are we 100% in the Blackfoot? Is this a national model? Absolutely not. It's about people taking a chance to make a difference. And that's why I say it's so important for landowners. We've got to get that through to landowners. They got to make that difference. So what are we doing with this grant? So in 2008, our idea was not only to really coordinate folks in Montana to find out what the hell was going on in Montana, but what's going on around this country. So in 2008, we held a first conference in Montana. We had 8 different landowners from different states, and you know, we had California, and I won't go through it all, but mostly sort of the western part. We just came back from Aberdeen, South Dakota last week, and we had 29 landowners from 23 different states. We're going to try to identify a landowner from every state in the nation. And you know what's crazy about that is that it doesn't matter whether you're from Mississippi or California or a redneck from Ovando, Montana. We got a lot in common. And we sat there, and it's unbelievable. So how do you think we can affect change? I may be all, you guys probably laugh, but so let's take a look at the Farm Bill. So that conservation title of the Farm Bill, it's getting schwacked. So how can we make a difference to that? I think what we've been doing in Montana is we've been working the hell out of our 2 senators and representatives. And we go back and they go, oh God, there's Jim again. Yeah, we sure want to help you as much as we can. What do you think Max Baucus has to do? Even as powerful a senator he is, what do you think he has to do? He's going to leverage against his folks there in D.C., isn't he? What if we have landowners that actually target those committees? And we have landowners from those states going back to tell the same story instead of just one guy. I think we can affect major change in how conservation is put on the ground here in this country by doing that. And so you'll be reading more. This program is called Partners for Conservation, and it is homegrown, landowner-led as much as you can get. We're going to be working out of Colorado as sort of our incorporated state, but it's an opportunity for us to take a stand. And I am privileged to be here today, but I'm just happy to tell you a story that I think is that landowners are starting to make a difference. And if you all will just take the time and keep hanging with us, I think we're going to make an amazing difference in this country. So thanks for all what you do, and thanks for giving me a chance to come talk a little bit today, but sure appreciate it very much.